My wife said she'd divorce me if I didn't let her best friend move in, but her friend betrayed her before the divorce was even done. My wife and I had been together for 6 years, but we had been married for about 4. We had no children. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment that we rented together. I work from home full-time, which meant the second bedroom wasn't just a guest room, it was my workspace. We weren't living in some 5-bedroom, 32-bathroom palace where there was room to bring in whoever needed a place to stay. An uncle goes crazy, shoots his neighbor, and needs somewhere else to stay while waiting for trial? No problem. We've got spare rooms. My best friend gets divorced and needs somewhere to stay while he mourns the loss of his marriage all day in his underwear? Say no more. We've got spare rooms. No, obviously not. Space was limited for everyone. That room was how I earned the money to pay half the rent every month. So that room had sentimental value to me. Sentimental because my wallet would suffer without it. And if that happened, I'd probably cry. I don't have an interesting name for her best friend, so I'll simply call her the friend. Besides, the word friend sounds ominous, or at least that's how it feels to me. This friend had been in my wife's life before I came along, and I understand that. They had known each other for years, and it was fine that they supported each other and all that, but everything has its limits. To be fair, at first I didn't have strong feelings about her one way or the other. She was simply part of the package. When you marry someone, you inherit their circle. That's how things work. But over time, the little things started piling up. The friend had a way of treating our apartment like it was her natural habitat, like one of those cats that walks into a place and says, "This is mine now, filthy humans." She would show up on weekends without much notice. She would stay for hours. She ate our food. That matters to both my stomach and my wallet. And she monopolized all of my wife's attention whenever she was there. I never made a big deal out of it. I would go into my office, shut the door, take the expensive food with me, and let them have their time together. I'm not the kind of person who needs to be included in everything, and I genuinely didn't care that they were close. What slowly and quietly started bothering me was the pattern of how little my comfort seemed to matter whenever the friend was involved. Fast forward to a Sunday night a few weeks ago. Sunday nights are already pretty bad because you get depressed knowing you have to work the next day. But this one was worse. We had just finished dinner. Nothing unusual had happened that evening up to that point. My wife sat across from me and told me that the friend's lease was about to end, that she had nowhere to go, and that she needed to move in with us. I asked the obvious questions. Where would she sleep? She would take the second bedroom. My office, I immediately pointed out. That room isn't a guest room. It's where I work, and without it, I don't have a functional space to do my job. I can't just go work at some random coffee shop and have someone yelling in the background, "I want a pretzel," while I'm talking to my boss. My wife said we would figure it out. I asked how long she expected her friend to live with us. I was expecting a week at most. She said a few months, and that was if everything went well. It could be longer if her friend couldn't find something affordable, which, with this economy, meant we would probably end up adopting her. I asked about utilities, food, and the additional cost of a third person living in a 2-bedroom apartment already meant for 2 people. She said we would figure that out too. Everything was very improvised. Every practical concern I raised got the same response. We'll figure it out, and don't worry about that right now. How am I not supposed to worry when the friend eats like she's just been rescued from a concentration camp every time she visits? I told her I needed to think about it. I wasn't saying no at that moment. I was saying I needed time to genuinely think through what this would mean for our living situation and for my ability to do my job. That's a reasonable response to a major request. I think that was more consideration than my wife deserved, especially considering what she did next. She replied, "Honey, take all the time you need and think it through calmly, because this is a marriage between 2 people, and we need to be on the same page because we love and respect each other very much." Of course she didn't say that. Her entire attitude changed, and she was no longer so reasonable and calm when she was basically demanding that we move her friend in. She didn't exactly become angry. It was more like she was recalibrating. She didn't say much. She just went to the bedroom. I thought, well, that wasn't so bad after all. But it was only the calm before everything became turbulent and confusing. About 45 minutes later, she came back into the living room and told me, in a completely flat and calm tone, that if I said no to this, she wanted a divorce. I didn't say anything back. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and went driving for about an hour. I just needed to be somewhere else for a while so I could think clearly. When I came back, she was already asleep. This was what kept going through my mind. She hadn't said it in the middle of a heated argument. There had been no fight beforehand. I hadn't said anything cruel or dismissive. I said I needed to think about it, and she went into the bedroom. She came back 45 minutes later with a prepared ultimatum. I had already made a decision, but I didn't tell her. Instead, I started wondering why this mattered so much to her that she was willing to destroy our 4-year marriage over it. The explanation I had been given was that her friend was losing her apartment. But people lose apartments all the time and find solutions. There were other options. There were other people she could stay with. Why was it so critical that she specifically come here to our 2-bedroom apartment and take over my workspace? During that period, I started looking through things I hadn't paid much attention to before. We had a shared calendar app. I opened it for something unrelated and, out of habit, started scrolling through recent entries. That was when I found it. There was an entry with a title along the lines of, "Talk to my husband about the friend moving in." It was dated 3 weeks before she ever mentioned it to me. She had been planning this for 3 weeks and hadn't told me anything, but that wasn't even the part that affected me most. 2 days after that entry, there was another one. A reminder to call the leasing office about adding an occupant. She had called our leasing office about adding the friend to our apartment before she had even asked me whether I was okay with it. She wasn't asking for my opinion about a decision that hadn't yet been made. She was informing me of a decision that had already been made, one she had been working on logistically for weeks, and the ultimatum was the mechanism she intended to use to make me comply or face consequences. The request had never been a request. It was a formality. I was supposed to say yes, and the threat of divorce was there to make sure I did. A few days later, the friend showed up at our door unannounced. I was the one who answered it. She was standing there with a bag and a coffee, smiling and completely relaxed, like she was arriving at her new home. I stood in the doorway and didn't move. My wife came rushing out of the bedroom, clearly already knowing she was coming. I looked at both of them and told the friend she wasn't coming inside. My wife immediately started saying I was controlling if I wouldn't let her best friend stay, and that I was making everything worse. I told her very directly that she had said she wanted a divorce if I said no. I had said no. So what exactly were we doing at that point? Nobody had an answer to that. The friend left. My wife was furious, but she had no valid argument, and she knew it. That's the thing about ultimatums. They only work if the other person is afraid of the consequence. She assumed I would give in. She assumed the threat of divorce would be enough to make me ignore all of my reasonable objections and simply agree. She miscalculated badly. A day or two later, she told me she was going to stay at her friend's place for a few days to clear her head. I said that was fine. She packed a bag and left. Once she was gone, I contacted a lawyer and told him everything that was happening. I wanted to change the apartment access code in case she and her friend locked me out while I was away, but he advised me not to do that because my wife was still a lawful tenant of the apartment, and there could be consequences. If she locked me out, then that would look bad for her. I don't know exactly when her friend's lease ends, but if she was already planning to move, there probably isn't much time left. I don't know how much longer my wife can stay with the friend, but I know she is using this to try to make me give in. It is not going to happen in a million years. I'm sorry for my wife, but if living with her friend is more important than living with her husband, I'll give her the divorce so they can live happily together. I'm not interested in being the third wheel in my own marriage. Update 1. I've been somewhat busy thinking and trying to find some explanation for why my wife was acting this way about her friend, so it took me a while to bring an update, but I just hope this lives up to your expectations. I've also been working on the most boring part of divorces and separations, which is all the paperwork. I went through our shared accounts and documented everything. The lease with both our names on it, the balances in the shared bank account, the utility accounts. I called the leasing office. I asked about the process of switching to a lease with only one occupant and what removing a co-tenant from the lease would involve. The person I spoke with explained the process. I wasn't committing to anything during that call. I was only getting information. She texted me several times asking when she could come back. I told her it was her apartment too, and she could come back whenever she wanted. She didn't come back because it was obvious she was waiting for me to beg her to return and bring her friend with her. If she genuinely wanted to fix anything, she would have come back. Instead, she stayed at the friend's place and continued texting me from there, which meant the friend's place was exactly where she wanted to be. She just also wanted to maintain access to our apartment and keep me as a backup. That wasn't going to happen. About a week after she left, she sent me a voice message. I don't know why she switched to a voice message instead of simply calling or texting, since that isn't normal for her, but she did. It was several minutes long. She talked about how I was making her suffer, and how she didn't think it was fair, how she felt I was doing this to isolate her from her friends, and how, in a healthy marriage, I wouldn't make her choose between her friend and me. Every manipulation tactic you can imagine, because nothing I did resembles her version of reality. A very distorted reality, because in no universe, not even one populated by sociopaths, would it seem reasonable to bring the friend into an apartment to live there for months. The next morning, I responded to the voice note by text, and I also managed to download the message in case she deleted it. I don't know, but I think someone whose name starts with law and ends with yer might appreciate all that information. She called immediately. I let it go to voicemail, but I still haven't listened to it. My lawyer, on the other hand, has. I don't know what it contains because I'm already done with all of this, but my lawyer does, and judging by his face, I can tell it's good. Divorce papers have already been filed, and I hope she puts her signature where her mouth is. If she wants a divorce unless I allow her friend to live in the apartment, then I hope her ultimatum wasn't an empty one. She still won't know about it when I post this. She's still at the friend's place, or at least I think she is, but she keeps texting occasionally. She still apparently operates under the assumption that I'm going to give in to her ridiculous demands. That's the biggest problem for her. She doesn't seem to see the blow coming. And before anyone calls me sexist for talking about hitting a woman, the way some people have called me unreasonable with my wife, let me make it clear that I mean that figuratively. I don't even want to be alone in the same room with my wife without my lawyer. Now, as for the reasons why my wife has done this, my very unprofessional investigation, because this isn't what I do for a living, suggests that my wife may have lost her job and would no longer have been able to cover her share of the rent. Since her friend still has a job, or at least I think she does, my wife apparently expected her to come here and cover my wife's share, which isn't fair because with 3 people, the expenses should at least be divided 3 ways. I know everyone was expecting something like my wife and her friend being in love, waiting to kick me out of the apartment, and then holding hands while skipping through a meadow. But that isn't what the information found suggests. Sometimes everything is much simpler than that, and there are no strange motives. This could have been solved if my wife had talked to me, but she didn't, and that's why we're ending a marriage. Edit. I think the most plausible explanation is that with my wife losing her job and her friend's lease ending, the timing lined up perfectly. So according to my wife, it was a solution where everyone won. She loves spending time with her friend. That matters. But I also know my wife is somewhat proud, and she would have had a hard time accepting me paying all of the expenses for a while. Of course, all of this is speculation because I never had that conversation with her, and I never will. I mean, what kind of conversation do you have with someone who behaved the way my wife did? Update 2. She now knows I filed for divorce, and these have been the consequences so far. I want to tell you because I think it matters, and because it sheds more light on what is happening. As I said before, much of this is my own theory, but I don't think I'm too far off from what is actually happening. She was still at the friend's house when the process server showed up there. I don't have details about what happened at the house, but based on what I learned afterward, I feel sorry for the process server because my wife did not seem rational. She called within minutes of receiving the papers. I knew the exact time she was going to be served, and let me tell you, she was hysterical. Not hysterical with sadness, hysterical with rage. She wanted to know whether I had lost my mind and why I was doing this to her. I told her I was giving her exactly what she wanted and nothing more. She said she hadn't meant the ultimatum literally, that it was just something people say, and that I wasn't supposed to take it literally. I told her that using divorce as a weapon to get what you want in a marriage is a sign that divorce is the only path left to take. She yelled a little more, but I told her she could speak to my lawyer and ended the call because there was no reason for us to discuss anything. About a week after she was served, she came back to the apartment to collect some of her things. Her lawyer contacted mine to arrange it. I was there. I was sitting at my desk working when she came in. She moved around the bedroom packing boxes. I stayed at my desk and recorded the entire situation. She tried to start a conversation twice. I answered with 1 or 2 words, so it was obvious that I didn't want to have a conversation. Before she left, she said I wasn't the person she thought I was, and that she was very disappointed in me. Now, why was she taking her things when she was also on the lease? Because although she had planned to speak with the landlord about adding the friend to the lease, she hadn't actually done it. And when I told the landlord what was happening, let's just say he wasn't happy about adding a 3rd adult to the lease. So he preferred removing my wife from the lease, which he could do because of a clause, and avoiding problems. According to him, 3 adults living in the same place tend to cause problems, and my wife's behavior did not inspire confidence. So now I'm the only person on the lease. Fast forward another week or so, I started receiving notifications that she was removing me from our shared accounts one by one. Shared location was first. I got the little notification that she had stopped sharing her location. Then the streaming account she had been paying for. Then the shared grocery list app we had used for years. I don't know whether she thought that would bother me. Around the same time, I was still in a group chat with several people who knew both of us. It wasn't anything close-knit, just one of those group chats that accumulates over the years because of some event or shared connection and never completely dies. Someone in that chat casually mentioned that the friend had been telling people I had kicked my wife out of the apartment and that I was being an asshole about it. I want to be honest. My first instinct was to ignore it completely, but then I realized it was my opportunity to show everyone that my wife and her friend were both liars. I had some evidence, which is how I learned a lot of things about my wife in the first place, so I put it in the chat and let everyone draw their own conclusions. I didn't get many responses, to be honest, but nobody accused me of anything or defended my wife either. I think nobody wanted to get involved, and that was that. That's fine with me. Less drama involving third parties who have nothing to do with this situation. My wife is still living with her friend as of the time I'm writing this, but I know she'll have to leave soon because someone in that same group mentioned it. He said my wife had asked whether both of them could move in with him for a few days until they found a solution, and he asked whether anyone else in the group had received a similar request. Based on the people who replied in the chat, it doesn't look like anyone else had, except for that person. In other news, my wife is refusing to simply sign the papers and let us get on with our lives. In legal terms, my wife is making demands in the divorce. Rather irrational ones, by the way. In my interpretation, she wants to be as petty as possible during the divorce. Funny for someone who threatened that she wanted a divorce to force me to submit to her and is now doing everything possible to avoid giving me one. Her job loss has now been confirmed. I was 95% sure in my previous post, but I didn't want to present it as confirmed and only mentioned it as a rumor. Because of that, my theory that the circumstances were perfect for her friend to move in has become stronger. I'll probably never be able to confirm it, but I want to give you some kind of answer as to why my wife became so irrational about all of this. I know my wife's ego has played a major role in this, but she will never admit it. But I would like to admit that I'm very grateful because I've been receiving very helpful comments from the beginning. I know nobody had to do that, but you did, and it has helped a lot. I've also received offers from people wanting to move in with me, but I'm not looking for a roommate. For now, I think I can absorb the expenses my wife used to pay. Looking for something smaller isn't an option right now, partly because the rent is pretty good, and if I move somewhere smaller, I won't save much money at current prices. I also need the extra room for work. When it's time to renew the lease, that will be the time to make decisions. But for now, I think everything is covered. Update 3. I'm not divorced yet, but I wanted to leave this here, even if only in the comments because it's relevant. The lease of my soon-to-be ex's friend, since it no longer makes sense to keep calling her my wife, has ended, and they had to move out. That matters, but not nearly as much as what I'm about to write now. The friend moved into an apartment by herself, and my ex had to move back in with her parents. Someone I would consider a reliable source told me that her friend preferred living alone if my ex wasn't going to help pay the rent. She couldn't afford a 2-bedroom place by herself and didn't know when my ex would be able to start contributing again. I consider this person reliable because my ex asked to stay with him, although I don't think he was the only person she asked, and he said no. He made up an excuse about having relatives moving in soon, but he admitted to me that he actually refused because of what my ex had done to me. So I suppose telling people the real reasons behind what happened did have an effect. And if she is living with her parents now, it's probably because other people told her something similar. The good news for me is that she is no longer making ridiculous demands in the divorce and wants to finish this before her savings run out. A wise decision, if you ask me. Edit. I don't know why, if she had savings, she couldn't pay a few months of rent with her friend until she found another job. Maybe she thought she would live there for free and preserve her savings or something like that. She hasn't exactly been making great decisions for a while, so anything crazy could be going through her head right now. Update 4. I feel a sense of relief I can't describe, but I'll try to convey it in my final update. The only certainties in life are paying taxes to greedy Uncle Sam and death, but I'm fairly certain I'm making this my final update. With the divorce finished, I think I can take a break. The divorce is finalized, and although I won't bore you with the details, I think the outcome was what you would expect. Unless you have unreasonable expectations like my ex did and want something you aren't entitled to. But that's how she has been for the past few months, which becomes relevant once I tell you a little more. So yes, I'm divorced, and I haven't heard anything else about the friend. I don't think they're as close anymore. Or maybe they had an argument because the friend refused to let her live with her without paying rent. My ex is still living with her parents, and she'll probably continue doing so for a while. The reason is that she is having trouble getting another job. The problem is that she was fired for cause, and now nobody wants to hire her. I don't want to give details in case someone finds information about the incident online, but after I learned what had happened, I searched for it, and it's easy to find because she was fired. She didn't murder anyone at work, but it's something that anyone with the relevant information could discover in 5 minutes, and then also figure out who I am. That would completely defeat the purpose of writing this from a throwaway account. It's somewhat funny, but nothing illegal enough for her to face charges. But it is viewed badly enough that it's possible nobody in the city or in her field will hire her. It also wasn't infidelity, if that's what you're thinking. I won't confirm in the comments whether anyone guesses correctly, but I want to find out whether it's as strange as I think it is, or whether it's more common than I realize. Edit. So far nobody has come close, so it's possible that it really is strange.